Excellencies, Honorable Vice Presidents, Ministers, Deputy Ministers, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor for me to be elected as chair of the 55th session of the Commission for Social Development, and I thank you for putting your trust in me. It is my privilege to welcome all of you to this session of the Commission for Social Development. I would like to take this opportunity to pay tribute to His Excellency Ambassador Ion Ginga, the permanent representative of Romania to the United Nations, who steered the work of the Commission so ably during its 54th session. Furthermore, I would like to thank members of the Bureau who carried forward the preparatory work for the 55th session in the time before my designation as chair. I'm particularly grateful to Ms. Elisabeta David from the Permanent Mission of Romania for guiding the work of the Bureau in this interim period. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. The adoption in 2015 of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development was a historical step forward in our common approach to tackling the many challenges all societies and countries face. Of course, the biggest advantage of the Sustainable Development Goals in comparison to earlier goals and action plans is their inclusivity, both in terms of scope and in terms of applicability to all member states. The agenda is, as the President of the 71st General Assembly keeps reminding us, a blueprint for humanity's survival. Last year, we entered the implementation phase of the 2030 Agenda and the SDGs, with 22 countries already presenting their voluntary national reviews at the high-level political forum. This year, the interest by member states is simply enormous. As far as I know, and the President of ECOSOC may correct me, 43 countries want to participate in the voluntary national reviews. The mandate of the Commission for Social Development is to discuss, evaluate, and make policy recommendations in the field of social development, a mandate that predates the SDGs, but that has been rendered all the more relevant by the overarching and cross-cutting theme of the 2030 Agenda of leaving no one behind. And there are still a lot of issues to be tackled within the mandate of the Commission. I would just like to flag a few. While extreme poverty continues to decline fairly rapidly, nonetheless, 786 million people still live in poverty. At the same time, we're also witnessing worrisome trends of rising inequality and social exclusion in both developed and developing countries. Growth continues to disappoint, both in terms of its level and in terms of its ability to contribute to prosperity for all and to reducing unemployment. Tackling poverty in all its forms will require sustained, inclusive, and equitable growth and determined policy action. Effective youth policies are central to poverty eradication and to the implementation of the 2030 Agenda. Key in this endeavor is the creation of decent work for all, in particular young people, who are disproportionately affected by unemployment, underemployment, vulnerable employment, and working poverty. Through the Global Initiative on Decent Jobs for Youth, the UN is already hard at work with many partners in this field. As always, these efforts need to take particular account of young people most vulnerable to experiencing poverty, such as girls and young women, youth with disabilities, indigenous youth, young migrants, and rural youth. On the conceptual level, there has been significant progress over the past decades with regard to the rights and inclusion of persons with disabilities. They are the subject of the landmark Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, have been recognized as a cross-cutting development issue, and have been mainstreamed into the 2030 Agenda, as well as other recently adopted development frameworks in the fields of disaster risk reduction, humanitarian action, financing for development, and urban development. However, in daily life, persons with disabilities often still face marginalization and encounter significant barriers to their inclusion and participation. Poverty is also a major threat to the well-being of older persons. Their numbers are projected to continue to grow fast to about 1.4 billion globally in 2030. In view of the sheer magnitude of the growth in the old age population, particularly in low and middle income countries, ending poverty in all its forms everywhere depends on the international community and national governments recognizing and addressing old age income security. The long-term success of strategies towards ending poverty depends to a large extent also on policies targeting families with children and aiming to eliminate the intergenerational transmission of poverty. In fact, policies promoting children's well-being should involve families as primary caregivers responsible for children's development. Moreover, families are also primary caregivers for older persons and those with disabilities. Supporting families in caring for vulnerable family members should therefore be a priority in social policy making at national levels. Last year, the Commission for Social Development affirmed that it would contribute to the follow-up to the 2030 Agenda by supporting the thematic reviews of the High-Level Political Forum, and decided to report on social aspects related to the agreed main theme of ECOSOC in order to contribute to its work. With its decision that the priority theme for its 2017-2018 cycle will be strategies for eradicating poverty to achieve sustainable development for all, the Commission is well in line with the main theme of ECOSOC for its 2017 session. Furthermore, there will be panel discussions on the emerging issue of promoting integrated policies for poverty eradication, youth development in the 2030 Agenda, and on leaving no one behind, poverty and disability. I'm firmly convinced that an inclusive, multi-stakeholder approach is perhaps more important in the work of this Commission than in any other one, and I believe that our work can only profit from the involvement of as wide a range of actors as possible. With the alignment of its topics with the broader discussions in ECOSOC and the HLPF, the Commission has shown its readiness to provide concrete input and play its role in the follow-up and review process of the SDGs. I'm therefore looking forward to fruitful, in-depth discussions of these topics during our general debate and the high-level panel discussions. I hope that we will be able to distill concrete input into the work of the High-Level Political Forum and of ECOSOC. And finally, I believe that the Commission should continue to review how it does its work in order to ensure that it can best harness the potential and knowledge gathered here, and for it to be a strong advocate for all questions of social development. I thank you. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, it is now my honor to welcome the President of the Economic and Social Council, His Excellency Frederick Musiwa Makamure Shava, and I invite him to address the Commission. Excellency, you have the floor.
Chairman of the Commission, thank you very much, and congratulations for your election to this very important post. Mr. Lenny Montiel, Assistant Secretary General for Economic Development in DESA, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It is my great pleasure to be here at the opening of one of the oldest and also the first of the economic functional commissions to meet this year. Your work will set an example for the success of all the other commissions that will meet in later months to deliberate on socio-economic issues. The Economic and Social Council and the entire ECOSOC system, particularly the system's functional commissions, are focused on the broad United Nations Development Agenda and on supporting the effective achievement of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and its 17 Sustainable Development Goals at the national level. In the context of increasingly complex and often volatile global environment, the ECOSOC functional commissions provide unique global multi-stakeholder platforms to engage in action-oriented, substantive discussions and provide integrated and coherent policy guidance on the global development agenda. The Commission plays an essential role for the effective implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Your work on promoting social policies that seek to improve the lives of all people, including youth, older persons, and persons with disabilities, affect the lives of billions of people, helping to ensure, therefore, that no one is left behind. Furthermore, the thematic areas of your work are at the center of this agenda. The first of the Sustainable Development Goals is to end poverty by 2030. It is becoming increasingly difficult to reach people who remain in extreme poverty, as they often are marginalized, live in fragile socioeconomic contexts, and usually in remote areas. Access to good schools, access to health care, electricity, safe water, and other critical services still elude too many people, especially those living in poverty. Moreover, for those who have been able to move out of poverty, progress is often temporary. It will be critical to find ways to tackle these issues to fulfill the promises of the 2030 Agenda. It is in this context that I identified as my top priorities infrastructure development and industrialization, especially in the context for African development and also for all the countries in special situations. Today, and today's generations can be the one that eradicates poverty and turns the tide on inequality, exclusion, and environmental degradation. Achieving those objectives requires implementing a broad set of mutually reinforcing social and economic policies and strategies, as well as leveraging the synergies between them. That is why your discussions matter. Your deliberations on strategies for poverty eradication and on issues of leaving no one behind will provide important guidance to member states. In this endeavor, I take note that you have the unfailing support of the Department of Economic and Social Affairs with 70 years of experience behind it. I appreciate your efforts to ensure that your discussions in this session will provide valuable input to the 2017 ECOSOC main theme on, and I quote, eradicating poverty in all its forms and dimensions through promoting sustainable development and expanding opportunities and addressing related changes, unquote, as well as the 2017 High-Level Political Forum theme, which I quote says, eradicating poverty and promoting prosperity in a changing world. Indeed, the chairman did align your own theme to both the theme of the ECOSOC and the theme of the HRPF. Finally, I also would like to highlight that the work of the Commission will be further simplified by ECOSOC's integration segment, which will take place from the 8th to the 10th of May this year. I am pleased to share that the Council just agreed that the segment will focus on the theme, and I quote, of making eradication of poverty an integral part, an integral objective of all policies. And the question it asks is, what will it take? I look forward, therefore, to your deliberations, to your contributions in this regard, and I want to thank you very much for your attention this morning. Thank you.
I thank the President of the Economic and Social Council for his statement. And it is now my pleasure to welcome the Assistant Secretary General for Economic Development, Mr. Lenny Montiel, who will be delivering a statement from the Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Antonio Guterres. Mr. Montiel, you have the floor.
Mr. Philip Charworth, Chair of the Commission, President of ECOSOC, Ambassador Frederick Muziwa Makamure Shava, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to attend the 55th session of the Commission for Social Development, and it is my pleasure to deliver the following remarks on behalf of Secretary General Mr. Antonio Guterres, who was unable to be here today. I quote, "The Commission for Social Development meets at a time of global contradictions. Unprecedented scientific and technological advances are driving progress, yet inequality is worsening. Globalization is asymmetric. Resources, goods, and services move freely, but they do not always reach those who need them. And all too often, the movement of people is restricted. There has been significant progress over recent decades in eradicating extreme poverty, improving healthcare and education, and ensuring the delivery of other essential development services for people the world over. The adoption of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development sets the bar even higher with its universal and indivisible set of goals that aim to leave no one behind. Let us make no mistake. These are challenging times. Conflicts are reversing decades of hard-won improvements in social well-being, and discriminatory, exclusionary practices widen the gap between rich and poor. Even in peaceful societies, prosperity has not been shared. This year, the number of jobless people is expected to exceed 201 million, and another 2.7 million could be added to the unemployment rolls by 2018. Anxiety is mounting as societies cope with urbanization, climate change, population growth, and other megatrends. In this uncertain environment, I welcome your focus on strategies for eradicating poverty in all its forms to achieve sustainable development for all. The new agenda requires a redefinition of traditional planning, monitoring, and delivery of sustainable development objectives. Unlike the Millennium Development Goals, the Sustainable Development Goals require whole-of-society approaches involving public and private partners. They also call for a new set of tools and policies tailored to the national context. Your work here will help to complete unfinished business. Your guidance will allow our UN country teams and the Secretariat to better tailor our support to meet countries' specific needs. I am committed to integrating the UN's work for peace, sustainable development, and human rights. Sustainable development is an end in itself. Sustainable and inclusive development is also the best way to secure and ensure lasting peace. In this effort, we must give top priority to achieving gender equality and the empowerment of women. Societies are strong and vibrant when they appreciate diversity as an asset rather than fearing it as a threat. Toward this end, I encourage you to support the United Nations Together campaign, which is addressing rising xenophobia, promoting non-discrimination, and fostering global solidarity. I wish you great success in advancing social development as part of our commitment to ensuring a life of dignity for all. End of quote. Thank you very much.
I thank the Assistant Secretary General for Economic Development and once again the President of the Economic and Social Council for their thoughtful and inspiring statements and for joining us this morning. I wish to inform the Commission that the President of the General Assembly, His Excellency Peter Thompson, will address the Commission at 12:45 today, so towards the end of our morning session. I encourage all delegations to be present in the room at that time to listen to his statement. So I kindly ask delegations to remain seated to allow Mr. Montiel and Ambassador Chava to leave and for us to rearrange the podium. Just a few minutes. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I now invite the Commission to proceed to the election of the remaining officers of the Bureau for its 55th session. Delegations will recall that the Commission elected by acclamation Ms. Elisabetta David of Romania and Ms. Ana Sandoval Espinola of Paraguay as Vice Chairs for its 55th and 56th sessions at the first meeting of its 55th session on 12th of February 2016. At the same meeting, the Commission elected His Excellency Brian Bowler, Permanent Representative of Malawi to the United Nations, as Vice Chair of the Commission for its 55th session. Subsequently, the Secretariat received from the African states the endorsement of His Excellency Mr. Lot Tsonzi, Deputy Permanent Representative of Malawi to the United Nations, to replace His Excellency Brian Bowler as Vice Chair of the Commission for its 55th session. In addition, I am pleased to inform the Commission that the Asia-Pacific states have endorsed the candidature of Ms. Alanoud Al-Temimi of Qatar as Vice Chair for the 55th session of the Commission. In the absence of any other candidates, may I take it that the Commission wishes to elect His Excellency Lot Tsonzi of Malawi and Ms. Alanoud Al-Temimi of Qatar as Vice Chairs for the 55th session of the Commission for Social Development? I hear no objection. It is so decided. On behalf of the Commission, I would like to congratulate His Excellency Lot Tsonzi of Malawi and Ms. Alanoud Al-Temimi of Qatar on their election, and I look forward to our fruitful cooperation along with the rest of the Bureau members of the Commission. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I now wish to inform the Commission that following consultations within the Bureau, it has been agreed that our distinguished Vice Chair, Ms. Ana Sandoval Espinola of Paraguay, will assume the responsibilities of Rapporteur for this session of the Commission. I therefore invite Ms. Sandoval to take her seat at the podium. I would like to inform delegations that following consultations in the Bureau, it has been agreed that the division of responsibilities among the Bureau members for the draft resolutions to be considered by the Commission at this session will be as follows. I am coordinating, with the kind assistance of my colleague, Mr. Murad Mahidi, the consultations on the draft resolution on the rights of persons with disabilities. Ambassador Lot Tsonzi of Malawi is the Vice Chair responsible for the draft resolution entitled Social Dimensions of the New Partnership for Africa's Development, coordinated by South Africa on behalf of the Group of 77 and China. And Ms. Elisabetta David of Romania is the Vice Chair responsible for the draft resolution on policies and programs involving youth. I look forward to working closely with all members of the Bureau, and I wish them every success in their demanding and important work during the coming days. I now invite the Commission to turn its attention to item 2, entitled Adoption of the Agenda and Other Organizational Matters. The provisional agenda for the session is contained in document E/CN5/2017/1/Rev1, and the proposed organization of work is before you in Annex 1 to the same document. The proposed organization of work is also outlined in a tabular format contained in an informal document which has been made available on the website of the Commission for your advance information. I now invite the Commission to consider the provisional agenda for the session, which is contained in document E/CN5/2017/1/Rev1. The provisional agenda and documentation was approved by the Economic and Social Council in its decision 2016/225. Are there any comments on the provisional agenda? May I take it that the Commission wishes to adopt the provisional agenda? I hear no objection. It is so decided. Distinguished delegates, I now invite the Commission to turn to the proposed organization of work as contained in Annex 1 to the document E/CN5/2017/1/Rev1. In this regard, let me first make a few general comments about the conduct of work. I would like to seek your cooperation in starting all meetings on time, that is at 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. sharp, in order to make optimum use of the conference resources allocated to the Commission, thus reaching a utilization factor above the 80% benchmark as requested by the General Assembly in its Resolution 70/9 on pattern of conferences. May I take it that the Commission wishes to approve its organization of work on the understanding that further adjustments will be made if necessary during the course of its session? I hear no objection. It is so decided. In accordance with past practice, I would like to make the following proposal concerning the time limit for statements during the general discussion. Member States speaking on behalf of groups will be allowed to speak for 10 minutes. Member States speaking in their national capacity will be allowed 7 minutes for their statements. All other speakers will be allowed to speak for 5 minutes. May I take it that the Commission agrees with this proposal? I hear no objection. It is so decided. Distinguished delegates, as you are aware, the Commission will hold 3 high-level panel discussions during this session. In order to ensure that we can have meaningful and interactive debates during the session, I kindly request you not to read out prepared statements during the panel discussions. We should come prepared to interact, propose new and innovative ideas, and share our experiences so that we can draw upon good practices and lessons learned and react to the panel discussions themselves. I would also like to remind delegations that PaperSmart services are offered as an additional service for the 55th session of the Commission. Delegations wishing to circulate their statements electronically through the PaperSmart portal should send a copy of the statement at least 1 hour in advance of delivery to the PaperSmart email provided in the journal. The statements will be made available on the Commission PaperSmart portal during delivery by delegations. I also wish to remind delegations that the deadline for submission of all draft proposals to the Secretariat is next Tuesday, 7th of February at 5 p.m. Tuesday, 7th of February, 5 p.m. For further details on the submission of draft proposals, please contact the Secretary of the Commission. I now invite the Commission to begin its consideration of Agenda Item 3, entitled Follow-up to the World Summit for Social Development and the 24th Special Session of the General Assembly. Sub-item A, I quote, Priority Theme, Strategies for Eradicating Poverty to Achieve Sustainable Development for All. Sub-item B, I quote, Review of relevant United Nations plans and programs of action pertaining to the situation of social groups. And sub-item 3C, I quote, Emerging Issues, Promoting Integrated Policies for Poverty Eradication, Youth Development in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The documentation under Agenda Item 3 has been published in today's journal. I now give the floor to Ms. Daniela Bas, Director of the Division for Social Policy and Development of the Department of Economic and Social Affairs, to introduce the documents under Item 3 as a whole. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, distinguished delegates, and ladies and gentlemen. I have the honor to introduce the Agenda Item 3, entitled Follow-up to the World Summit for Social Development and the 24th Special Session of the General Assembly. There are going to be 5 of them. The first one about the priority theme. The title is Strategies. Strategies for Eradicating Poverty to Achieve Sustainable Development for All. So for your consideration, there is this report of the Secretary General. And this report provides a review of the progress made to eradicate poverty in all its forms and dimensions. Then it highlights strategies that have been implemented by countries to achieve this goal. It also highlights the discussion that can take place when it comes to challenges that remain in many countries, challenges that many countries are still facing. And then it concludes with a set of recommendations for further action. Then there is going to be a high-level panel discussion on this topic today in the afternoon. So If you read this report, once you read this report, you will notice that the report underlines the importance of political will. Political will of institutions, political will of governance, political will of partnerships, and the combination of mutually reinforcing social, economic, and environmental policies and strategies. So the importance of policy coherence and integration is emphasized in this report. The report also cautions the mainstreaming, that mainstreaming could also lead to a policy status quo. And we have to avoid that. We have to make sure that the job is really properly done, particularly if countries are to ensure that no one is left behind and to reach the furthest behind. And further, strategies for eradicating poverty to achieve sustainable development for all must be in accordance with varying national contexts, priorities, capacities, and indeed fiscal constraints. The report underscores the need to give priority to those furthest left behind, particularly women, persons with disabilities, youth, older persons, indigenous peoples, as well as, of course, as people living in rural areas and also remote areas. Mr. Chair, I would like now to spend a few words on the report of the Secretary General on the social dimension of the new Partnership for Africa's Development, NEPAD. Indeed, there has been progress in Africa in implementing the various programs and also priorities, such as reducing poverty, hunger, promoting employment creation, improving education and health outcomes, promoting gender equality and women's empowerment, as well as infrastructure development. But there are remaining challenges. High levels of extreme poverty, hunger, unemployment, increasing inequalities, illicit financial flows and insufficient domestic resources, and financial development assistance continue to undermine development efforts, particularly the eradication of poverty. So the report urges African countries to continue to accord priority to investing in agriculture, promoting structural transformation, increasing investment in health, education, and skills development, and as well as social protection. The report also encourages African countries to continue to develop and strengthen inclusive and accountable institutions and to develop integrated national policy frameworks. And the report also encourages the international community, including the United Nations system, to continue to promote, support, and facilitate the implementation of the African development priorities as set out in the African Union's Agenda 2063, and of course the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. So distinguished delegates, now I would like to bring your attention and your focus on the review of relevant United Nations plans and programs of action pertaining to the social, to the situation of social groups. I would like to draw the attention of the Commission on disability. There is a Secretary General report on mainstreaming disability in the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The report is presented in response to the ECOSOC resolution 2015/4 entitled Promoting the Rights of Persons with Disabilities and Strengthening the Mainstreaming of Disability in the Post-2015 Development Agenda. You see, the report provides a review of disability inclusion in existing international development frameworks, as well as of the status of persons with disabilities in social and economic development. And the report examines the history, the evolution of the role of the Commission for Social Development. in mainstreaming disability in the development agenda, and provides a summary of the multi-stakeholder panel discussions that were held during the last session of the Commission. Implementation of the post-2015 development agenda in light of the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. In the report, you will find recommendations for effectively mainstreaming disability in the implementation of the international agreed development goals. And the report concludes by providing options for consideration of an appropriate, complementary follow-up and review mechanism, taking into account existing intergovernmental mechanisms and processes. So delegates and delegations may wish to take these recommendations highlighted in the report into consideration in defining the role of the Commission for Social Development in mainstreaming disability in the implementation of the internationally agreed development goals and the 2030 Agenda. I would like now to move to the report and bring the attention of the Commission prepared by the Secretary General to policies and programs involving youth. The report recalls the need to robust, stand-alone youth policies coupled with consistent cross-sectoral efforts. And it provides a compilation of recent initiatives that were taken in the area of youth policies and programs, which are based on inputs received from member states, the United Nations system, and the civil society organizations. So it's very important, and it's key in the recommendations contained in the report, to think about development and how to strengthen existing evidence-based national policies for youth development, increase qualitative and quantitative research and data, and to see how effective these youth policies are, and ensuring also gender equality for girls and young women, and taking concrete measures such as establishing participatory processes. Now moving to another social group, aging. So the third review and appraisal of the Madrid International Plan of Action on Aging, preliminary assessment contained in document E/CN5/217/6. And this is the third review of the Madrid Plan of Action. The report provides analysis on the preliminary findings of the third review and appraisal, includes identification of prevalent and emerging issues and related policy options, and the Commission for Social Development in its 56th session in 2018 will conduct the global segment on the third review and appraisal cycle of the Madrid Plan. So in this regard, the report lists substantive and organizational suggestions offered by regional commissions for the consideration of member states to more effectively highlight the outcomes of the regional processes of the third review and appraisal cycle. And there is a description on how, and suggestions on how these panels and roundtables could be held, and which key points and key areas they might wish to focus on. And the idea would be then also of having a global roadmap on strategies on aging for the next 5 years. So delegations may wish to take these recommendations highlighted in the report into consideration in elaborating the program of work for the 56th session in 2018. The last is about emerging issues. As the chair said, emerging issues will be on focusing on promoting integrated policies for poverty eradication, youth development in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. There is a note prepared by the Secretariat to facilitate considerations for this item. And then there is also, as you know, a high-level panel discussing this item on Thursday, the 2nd of February. The Commission could play a leading role. The note that we have prepared also highlights the 2030 Agenda and how it is translated into national policies and strategies, and how it is implemented and monitored, and how implementation and monitoring can further play a key role in promoting and advancing a comprehensive vision about the social development. So the note suggests that in doing so, the Commission can explore and provide additional guidance on the effective implementation of youth policies and their links to the 2030 Agenda. Thank you very much.
I thank the Director of the Division for Social Policy and Development for her statement. Thank you. And I would now like to invite Mr. Daniel Perel, Chair of the NGO Committee for Social Development, to report to the Commission on the outcome of the Civil Society Forum, which was held on 30th of January in the afternoon and 31st of January. Please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, distinguished delegates, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning. So why are we here today? Why is the Commission considering strategies for the eradication of poverty? Why did Agenda 2030 identify poverty as the greatest global challenge facing the world today? Conditions of want and inequality have clear societal repercussions, social fragmentation, civil unrest. But I suggest that the main reason is that we live in an interconnected world where our moral horizon is broadening, leading to a new sense of urgency. Poverty is incompatible with our understanding of what it means to be human. Yet our systems and structures are unable to keep apace with these changes. For most of recorded history, much of humanity lived not far removed from hand-to-mouth conditions of survival and subsistence, individuals and communities alike. The great moral, ethical, and religious systems have always urged care for the hungry and the destitute, yet eradication of poverty was virtually unthinkable, as limited material resources were the lot of multitudes. Scientific and technological progress has allowed humanity to multiply many-fold the resources at its disposal, permitting a level of global prosperity undreamt of in past generations. And while it is sometimes hard to see in the turmoil today, this material progress has been accompanied by moral and ethical advances that are equally striking. Consider, for example, that it is now unacceptable that a mother should be prevented from rearing her infant because economic conditions force her to return to work within days of birth. It is insupportable that those who spent a lifetime contributing to society should face want and deprivation in their golden years. And it is taboo to build a physical structure that is inaccessible to a person with a disability. Many still face such conditions, of course, but the question today is not whether something should be done, but what should be done. How can broad-based and equitable prosperity be most effectively, efficiently, and lastingly established around the globe? Toward this end, the NGO Committee for Social Development highlighted social protection as a promising strategy for pursuing the eradication of poverty, and you should have received the Civil Society Declaration. Social protection, including floors, has emerged as a fundamental tool for alleviating poverty, reducing inequalities, and building socially inclusive societies. In this regard, many civil society organizations at the Commission stand ready to support efforts to use social protection systems to help bring about the world we want, including through the adoption of a resolution on this issue at a future Commission. But beyond addressing the symptoms of injustices, such as poverty, social protection offers a means of providing all members of society with the tools needed to contribute to the meaningful development of their communities, to address the true causes. A great deal of time in multilateral spaces is dedicated to matters of text and policy. This is important, but absent the human element, no effort will be either sustainable or transformative. This is one of the great strengths of civil society. It can bring the human face, heart, and experience into the room. This is a role the importance of which should not be overlooked. It is this very humanity that is the source of our highest honor. It is critical to ensuring that the good policies we work so hard to create have the beneficial impacts we intend. If the goals we envision are to be achieved, we will have to find ways to integrate the human and the technical, to ensure that our efforts reflect both efficiency and compassion. Finally, this leads to questions of our responsibilities and relationships as human beings, citizens, and institutions, particularly as partners in a shared endeavor like Agenda 2030. For example, we need to think about the relationships between independence and interdependence, the particular and the universal. Agenda 2030 and the SDGs, the Paris Climate Agreement, the New Urban Agenda, and other global agreements have consciously been created within a human rights framework to be universal in nature. Reflecting the reality of our shared global destiny, they champion an interdependence that also respects uniqueness, a web of relationships in which all nations and peoples are ultimately dependent on one another. Such an approach calls for a reframing of the thinking that has long held a privileged position in the discourse. Development efforts have historically been based on unspoken assumptions of independence, a tacit sense that some nations or groups already have what they need, and that their efforts to assist others are an expression of benevolence or charity. To embrace the implications of a universal agenda is to acknowledge that no segment of society already has what is needed to bring about the world we collectively desire for ourselves and our children. Whether wealthy or poor, rural or urban, a doctorate or illiterate, we all depend on each other, and we all have much to learn about a functioning society. This might be challenging to some and runs counter to certain ideologies. But interdependence, as expressed through relationships of mutual support and assistance, will increasingly be seen as the source of our greatest strength. The NGO Committee on Social Development is this year emphasizing social protection as a key strategy to eradicate poverty, or more accurately, to treat one of the major symptoms of an ailing society. However, we must all recognize, regardless of our affiliations, that a far more profound cure will be needed. This starts with recognizing the interdependence of all constituent parts, from individuals to nations to the international community. Finally, it will require an objective interrogation of deeply held assumptions about the nature and ultimate aims of development. Civil society, which significantly increased its request for participation at this Commission this year, stands ready to join in this journey, and we hope that the Commission and its constituent member states continue to create spaces for these shared endeavors. Thank you.
I thank the chair of the NGO Committee for Social Development for his presentation. And I now give the floor to our last presenter this morning, Ms. Rosemarie ter Horst, who will update us on the discussions during the ECOSOC Youth Forum, which was also held on the 30th and 31st of January, and their relationship to the work of the Commission for Social Development.
Thank you. Dear Excellencies, dear representatives, good morning to all. Thank you for the opportunity to report on what we have done in the ECOSOC Youth Forum for the past 2 days. It focused on the role of youth in poverty eradication and promoting prosperity in a changing world. The Chairman and President of the Commission already pointed out the importance of youth involvement, and the Director DSPD on UN DESA called for concrete follow-up, evidence-based. Thank you for acknowledging us. This 6th ECOSOC Youth Forum brought together over 500 young people from youth-led and youth-serving organizations. It was a packed room. There were overflowing rooms. National youth councils were represented, as well as 50 high-level government officials, including 25 ministers. It made it the largest and most diverse ECOSOC Youth Forum thus far. And young people and government officials were seated alternately. This facilitated intergenerational conversation benefited the young, and I think also the not-so-young. Organized in partnership with the President of ECOSOC, numerous UN entities working on youth issues, and youth organizations from the UN Major Group of Children and Youth, and International Coordination Meeting of Youth Organizations, the forum provided not only an important example of the power of multi-stakeholder partnerships, but an important space for youth voices to be brought to the UN. The focus of this year's ECOSOC Youth Forum is particularly pertinent to the work of the 55 Commission on Social Development, with this theme of strategies for eradicating poverty to achieve sustainable development for all. And particularly to the high-level panel on emerging issue, promoting integrated policies for poverty eradication, youth development in the 2030 agenda, being held here tomorrow. We believe many of the outcomes of the forum will help and inform you of the work, inform the work of the high-level panel and the Commission more broadly, and I'm therefore very happy to convey to you what the young people have discussed and deliberated. The forum was organized around thematic sessions corresponding with the high-level political forum review process in 2017, covering SDG 1 on poverty and decent jobs, SDG 2 on food and nutrition, SDG 3 on health, SDG 5 on gender equality, SDG 9 on infrastructure, and SDG 14 on oceans. In addition to the plenary session of the means of implementation and technology, we also discussed the SDGs and the implementation in regional groups and listened to experiences of young people from all over the world. It was truly inspirational. I will share with you the key outcome of these sessions, which are bolstered by a policy brief in the topics compiled by the UN Major Group of Children and Youth, which is available at the back of the room over there. And I would encourage you to take a copy and check if it can support your work or if you can help with the implementation. The issues raised stretch from gender equality, health, and resilience. We covered many, many topics. As we said, there were 500 young people representing numerous organizations. On SDG 1 and poverty, we discussed address multidimensional poverty by building skills and supporting non-formal education that generates livelihoods while empowering people, creating equality, and conserving the planet. So non-formal education. We call for broadening the measurement of youth unemployment beyond the current range of 15 to 24-year-old. We call for the ensuring of meaningful participation of young people at decision-making process related to all aspects of decent jobs, entrepreneurship, and employment. On SDG 2, we call for a creation of food sovereignty by harnessing local appropriate technologies and indigenous knowledge. We call for making specific provisions to reduce barriers for young people to engage in the sector. We call for including reporting on progress on macro and micronutrient components of food access, ensuring quality food that promote healthy lifestyles. On SDG 3, ensure healthy lives, we would call for ensure youth-friendly and minority-accessible and collectively determined national health plans. We want to call for including action on antimicrobial resistance in national implementation plans. We call for incorporating health outcomes in financing and trade strategies through mechanisms like taxation of harmful substances like sugar. On SDG 5, and this was a big topic in the Youth Forum, achieving gender equality and empowering all women and girls. We call for national plans on achieving SDG 5 that should be anchored in intergenerational partnerships with young women at the local level, but along with mobilization of young men and boys. We call for the economic empowerment dimensions that should go beyond entrepreneurship and facilitate support of young women-led cooperatives and enable non-formal education initiatives to enrich girls' and women's leadership skills. The scope of policy should not be only limited to provisions of SDG 5 and enhanced to include sexual and reproductive health and rights. And we call for the inclusion of tangible initiatives like menstrual hygiene management as priorities towards equal access and completion of education for young women to enable them to participate fully in this society. On SDG 9, building resilient infrastructure, we discussed that infrastructure design should not promote economic growth at the expense of biologic thresholds and environmental capacities, but it rather should promote inclusion and access to services, promoting sustainable livelihoods. We call you to formulate national plans for resilient infrastructure that are responsive to changing environments. That includes climate change, disasters, population growth, urbanization, economic fluctuations, and changing socio-political systems. On SDG 14, conserve and sustainable use of the oceans, seas, and marine resources, we call you to build on the work of the 2030 Agenda and the United Nations Environment Assembly by establishing a timeline and process to agree on the global treaty on plastics, including microplastics. And we want to call you to ensure oceans related capacity building should not only include littoral and islands, but also landlocked countries, because everyone is connected to an ocean in a way. We want to ask you to make youth a universal, cross-cutting theme across all formal means of implementation, and that links very much to what has been said before. We want to call you to implement the youth strategies already agreed on in the Addis Ababa Financing for Development outcome. We want to call for promotion of innovation in national frameworks that integrates local practices and traditional knowledge that reflect context and encourages frugal innovation. We call for the promotion of open science, democratization of software, hardware, enhancing the role of citizens, data science to facilitate innovation. The regional debates brought up issues that were at the center of young people's concerns in the different regions. From youth unemployment in the African Working Group, participation and decision-making processes in Europe and the North Americas, economic inequalities in Latin America and the Caribbean, climate change and sea level rise in the Asian and Pacific, and the need for peace by the Arab Working Group. The Civica State of Civil Society report shows that institutional space for civil society, especially for youth, is fast shrinking. We need to safeguard and better resource youth engagement mechanisms. For the UN, this entails support of the major group of children and youth and the UN Youth Delegate Program, of which we saw many in the Youth Forum. We call for engagement at the regional level and representatives of youth organizations in place at the UN. Working in partnership with and for youth is the only way in which we can meet the ambitious Agenda 2030. In addition to further investing in and enhancing initiatives like the Office of the Secretary General's Envoy on Youth. And I have a lot to say, but I will wrap up. And I will call for you to get the youth policy. Over the past numbers of years, we have seen the youth agenda in the UN grow. Joint efforts and collaboration of UN entities by the UN Interagency Network on Youth Development, with which the UN Major Group of Children and Youth and ICMIO work collaboratively. The important advocacy carried out by the outgoing Secretary General Envoy on Youth was very important, Ahmed Al-Hamdawi, and the increasing level of participation at the ECOSOC Youth Forum highlight the growing recognition and the critical role youth play in sustainable development. Globally, we face many challenges. In the world today, seems much more tumultuous and threatening than even this time last year. For our development efforts to be a success, we must work together, in partnership. We must strengthen our mechanisms for meaningful youth engagement at all levels. We must leverage the power and innovation of young people to create a world of tolerance and respect for all and the planet, so that in 2030 we can truly say that no one has been left behind. Thank you.
I thank Ms. Horst for her presentation. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, the Commission is now invited to begin its general discussion of sub-item 3A, the priority theme, strategies for eradicating poverty to achieve sustainable development for all. Before giving the floor to the first speaker, I would like to remind all delegations to kindly respect the agreed time limits in the interest of speedy deliberations and respect to other delegations. To assist speakers in managing their time, the red light on the microphone will start blinking when 1 minute is left, as a signal for the speaker to begin wrapping up the intervention. Having said that, it is now my honor to give the floor to the distinguished permanent representative of Ecuador, who will be speaking on behalf of the Group of 77 and China. You have the floor.
Muchas gracias.
Many thanks, Chair. I have the honor to speak on behalf of G77 and China on a very significant global problem which has been considered as the priority theme for the work of this Commission. It has been declared the priority theme. And that priority theme is strategies for eradicating poverty to achieve sustainable development for all. I wish to convey my group's congratulations to you as the chair of the 55th session of the Commission for Social Development, and my congratulations also go to the other members of the Bureau. The G77 and China guarantees you that we will fully support and cooperate with you during your mandate during this session. We are grateful also to the Secretary General for having presented his reports to us. These reports will no doubt contribute to enriching our debates and assist the work of the Commission. Chair, 2015 was a historic year. During this year, the international community agreed upon a set of new goals and universal commitments which will guide our work for the coming years. The Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction. There was also the Addis Ababa Action Plan. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development was another milestone, as was the Paris Agreement. 1 year later, we also adopted the new urban agenda. With the adoption of Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development, we ushered in a phase for implementation and the follow-up of the global agenda, and we moved towards a sustainable future. This agenda, which we adopted, acknowledged that the eradication of poverty in all its forms and facets, including extreme poverty, is perhaps the most major challenge facing the world and is a sine qua non if we are to achieve sustainable development. The Commission for Social Development can provide a significant contribution to the monitoring and follow-up process for Agenda 2030 through the high-level political forum on sustainable development under the aegis of ECOSOC. We can provide significant contributions to the work of this forum, and through this forum can share strategies for the eradication of poverty, ultimately to achieve sustainable development and eradicate poverty for all. It is crucial that the international community bolsters current commitments that are contained in the Copenhagen Action Plan from the World Summit on Social Development. At the same time, the international community must implement an integrated sustainable development program which is ambitious and which will have a proper impact, and an agenda which will ensure that no one is left behind. My group says that the high-level political forum this year states that this theme is the eradication of poverty and the promotion of prosperity in an evolving world. This issue coincides with that of this session and is in line with the momentum given to Agenda 2030. This Commission consequently must send out a clear message to the high-level political forum. This message must say that sustainable development goals are inextricably linked with the well-being of young people, women and children, indigenous peoples, persons with a disability, aging persons, refugees and other groups, and acknowledging this interdependency is vital if we are to fulfill the Agenda 2030. G77 plus China once again underscores the importance of the World Summit on Social Development. This was convened in Copenhagen in 1995, and this summit was and continues to act as a key reference point for social development at a national and international level. Consequently, we reaffirm the G77's commitments to ensuring full compliance with goals agreed upon more than 20 years ago, particularly those pertaining to poverty eradication, full employment and social integration. Chair, G77 plus China is deeply concerned by the fact that uneven progress has been achieved regarding the achievement of interrelated goals agreed upon on the Social Development Summit. We are also concerned by the lack of satisfactory progress made with social advancement in general. Conflicts, the slowdown of economic growth at a global level, volatility of financial markets, youth employment levels, threats to global health, humanitarian crises, corruption, challenges thrown up by climate change, among other challenges, are together creating further obstacles for the achievement of social commitments and goals. Consequently, the role of the Commission is crucial if we are to face up to these challenges in order to ultimately achieve and maintain progress in the sphere of social development. Eradication of poverty is perhaps the greatest moral imperative facing our planet. Despite the fact that the world has taken great strides forward in eradicating poverty once and for all continues to be one of the most major challenges facing the international community. Mobilizing adequate, sufficient resources resources for this goal is one of the major requirements if we are to ensure that developing countries are able to implement relevant policies and programs designed to effectively eradicate poverty. Moreover, social exclusion continues to be a major challenge in many parts of the world. There are widening inequalities and difficulties in finding decent work. This negatively impacts upon young people, elderly people, indigenous people, persons with disabilities and migrant persons. Other people that are in vulnerable situations are also affected by these phenomena, as indicated in the report of the Secretary General. If we maintain a business as usual approach in developing policies, this will not be sufficient to achieve goals established. New approaches and strategies are required if we are to combat poverty. Political will and finance here can make the difference. It will not be possible to significantly reduce extreme poverty and indeed other facets of poverty if we do not see appropriate resources channeled into these goals and without international cooperation. Chair G77 plus China welcomes and commends the work of the Commission to help certain social groups and its work in reviewing relevant social programs for young people, people with disabilities, family, among others. We commend the Commission's continued interest in the social facets of the new Partnership for Development for Africa, NEPAD. Our discussions at this meeting during this session will allow us to explore new ways of bolstering the social dimension of sustainable development. G77 plus China also wishes to underscore the importance of eradicating obstacles which hinder people's ability to assert their right to self-determination. This particularly concerns peoples living under colonial domination or that are victims of other forms of occupation or foreign control. Their national sovereignty and territorial integrity should be fully respected. If these rights are not enjoyed, this has a negative impact on their social and economic development. Chair, G77 plus China is acutely aware that poverty in all its forms and all its facets, as well as unemployment, income inequality, the disintegration of the social fabric and inequalities within and between countries are complex issues and interdependent global challenges. We emphasize the need to tackle poverty in a holistic fashion in order to ensure that nobody is left behind. Moreover, as is stated in Agenda 2030, it is crucial to tackle poverty in a more coherent, holistic, integrated and systematic fashion. My group is fully committed to working tirelessly in order to ensure the full and proper implementation of Agenda 2030 in a balanced and integrated fashion. This will allow us to achieve sustainable development on 3 fronts: social, economic and environmental, and will allow us to learn lessons tap into the lessons learned from the implementation of the Millennium Development Goals. We will attempt to resolve issues which have not been resolved. This should all be the focus of new strategies to eradicate poverty and exclusion in order ultimately to achieve sustainable development for all. To achieve these goals, there needs to be greater efforts deployed at an international level in order to ensure that 2030 is implemented properly and that we achieve real success. It is only together that we will be able to build the world we wish to see and the world that we all deserve. Thank you. I thank the distinguished permanent representative of Ecuador for that statement and for keeping to time. Thank you.
It is now my honor to give the floor to the Deputy Permanent Representative of Malta, who will be speaking on behalf of the European Union. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and at the outset, let me congratulate you on your election as Chair. I have the honor to speak on behalf of the European Union and its member states. The candidate countries Turkey, the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, Montenegro, Serbia, and Albania, the country of stabilization and association process and potential candidate Bosnia and Herzegovina, as well as Ukraine, the Republic of Moldova and Georgia, align themselves to this statement. First of all, we would like to thank the Department of Economic and Social Affairs for the preparatory work carried out in advance of this session, and the Secretary General for his report, which provides the basis for our debate today. We would also like to welcome the focus of this session of the Commission for Social and Development on strategies for eradicating poverty to achieve sustainable development for all. Today's debate is strongly linked to the joint efforts we are currently engaged in to effectively implement the 2030 Agenda with its sustainable development goals and targets. This agenda represents a commitment to eradicate poverty and achieve sustainable development by 2030 worldwide, ensuring that no one is left behind. The European Union and its member states are fully committed to be front-runners in implementing the 2030 Agenda and the SDGs, in line with the principle of subsidiarity. Sustainable development has long been at the heart of the European project. The EU treaties give recognition to its economic, social and environmental dimensions, which should be addressed together. The EU is committed to development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. A life of dignity for all within the planet's limits that reconciles economic prosperity and efficiency, peaceful societies, social inclusion, and environmental responsibility is at the essence of sustainable development. The 2030 Agenda will further catalyze a joined-up approach between the EU's external action and its internal policies, including in the area of poverty eradication and the fight against social exclusion, as well as the work for inclusive and sustainable economic growth, employment, and decent work for all. Indeed, while all 28 member states are now recovering from the crisis, poverty and exclusion are still a reality. Across the EU, 119 million people are at risk of poverty or social exclusion. Children and young people are those who are affected the most compared to the rest of the population. More jobs and growth are the best drivers of bringing people out of poverty or social exclusion. This is why we made this a priority through launching the Investment Plan for Europe and putting a more social Europe at the heart of Europe's political agenda, which we aim to achieve through integrated and comprehensive actions. Our efforts are bearing fruit. 9 million young people have already benefited from the Youth Guarantee, and we have recently topped it up with an additional 2 billion euros to help an additional 2 million young people. Through the European Social Fund, we are allocating at least 20% of finance to measures combating poverty and social exclusion. In addition, more emphasis is put on social priorities in the framework of the European semester, which is the yearly cycle of economic policy coordinated within the EU, and also via reform and investment in each EU member state. This is taking shape through a wide array of policies and actions linking up to economic and social policies. For example, EU member states are in the process of redesigning their social protection systems to improve the promotion of labour market participation and provide adequate employment security and income replacement. Tax and benefit schemes are also increasingly geared towards providing adequate social support and work incentives. National pension systems are increasingly better reflecting growing life expectancy. Efforts are also being made to ensure that health policies support and reinforce social safety nets and active inclusion strategies. Furthermore, in support of the EU member states' policies, EU-level actions have been put in place or initiated recently to address long-term unemployment within the EU, which is a key employment social challenge impinging on Europe's growth and growth strategy. Also, a new Accountability Act is proposed to ensure that disabled and old people get access to goods and services necessary for them to participate fully in society. The new Skills Agenda for Europe, launched last year, will help improve the quality of people's skills and their relevance in the labour market. According to studies, 70 million Europeans lack adequate reading and writing skills, and even more have poor numeracy and digital skills, which puts them at risk of unemployment, poverty and social exclusion. This comprehensive EU approach resonates strongly with the first recommendations set out in the Secretary-General's report to this committee, which advocates for comprehensive, integrated and coordinated approaches to achieve sustainable poverty eradication. Indeed, EU experience confirms that structural reforms innovative active inclusion approaches and solutions which combine adequate income support, access to quality services, and inclusive labour markets, while ensuring equal opportunities for both women and men, are necessary to fight poverty and social exclusion effectively, especially in the context of fiscal sustainability constraints. In addition, in order for the EU and the Euro area to be able to translate our agenda for social fairness into further concrete actions, work is underway towards a European pillar of social rights. This initiative, once adopted later on this year, will become a reference framework to screen employment and social performance of participating EU member states and to drive reforms at national level, while also serving as a compass for upward social convergence within the Euro area and beyond. In order for these actions to become a success, we engage with the relevant EU level and national public and private actors. This includes promoting various opportunities of exchange for a better dialogue with social partners and civil society to stimulate the sharing of best practices with regards to innovative, integrated approaches to combat poverty and social exclusion. Concerning EU external action, the key objectives of our development policy is to help eradicate poverty in a context of sustainable development. It is a cornerstone of EU relations with the outside world, alongside foreign, security and trade policy, as well as the international aspects of other policies like environment, agriculture and fisheries. Providing over half of all global development aid, the EU remains the world's leading donor. Late last year, the European Commission and the European External Action Services presented a proposal for a new European consensus on development, whose objective is to do more, do it better and do it differently. Once adopted, this new consensus will provide the framework for a common approach to development policy shared by and applied by the EU and its member states, working together to implement the 2030 Agenda and its SDGs. The proposal reflects the paradigm shift established by the Addis Ababa Action Agenda, which is an integral part of the 2030 Agenda, placing domestic actions and sound policies at its heart. It reflects the fact that each country has primary responsibility for its own economic and social development and promotes a new global partnership for sustainable development encompassing policies and financial means. The new consensus includes a series of examples of how the EU development policy might change in response to the 2030 Agenda, including in the areas closely connected to poverty eradication, such as action to promote gender equality, youth employment, access to energy services, universal health coverage, universal access to quality education and training, adequate and sustainable social protection, and decent work for all, as well as focusing on aid for the poorest and fragile states. The European External Investment Plan, which is also proposed, is an example of smarter use of official development assistance to leverage funding from other sources, create quality and decent jobs, and generate inclusive, sustainable growth for the benefit of the poorest. It will encourage investments that otherwise would not happen, for example in conflict-affected areas or where economic governance is lacking. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to the Deputy Permanent Representative of Malta, also for staying just inside the time limit. And it is now my honor to give the floor to the Distinguished Permanent Representative of Vietnam, who will be speaking on behalf of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. You have the floor, Madam.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have the honor to speak on behalf of the 10 members of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, namely Brunei Darussalam, Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos PDR, Malaysia, Myanmar, the Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, and my own country, Vietnam. ASEAN allies itself with the statement delivered by the Distinguished Permanent Representative of Ecuador on behalf of the G77 and China. Mr. Chair, ASEAN welcomes the priority theme, Strategies for Eradicating Poverty to Achieve Sustainable Development for All, which is highly relevant and timely, especially in preparation for the upcoming 2017 High-Level Political Forum. We reiterate our commitments to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development that recognizes eradicating poverty as an overarching goal and an indispensable requirement for sustainable development. It is important to underline the complementarity of the 2030 Agenda with ASEAN community building efforts to uplift the living standards of our peoples. Mr. Chair, ASEAN is fully committed to poverty reduction. After nearly 3 decades, the share of people living in extreme poverty in the region has fallen from 1 in 2 to 1 in 8 persons. The Human Development Index of ASEAN member states has improved on average from 0.635 in 2005 to 0.696 in 2015. In this connection, we wish to share a regional view on the priority theme. First, undoubtedly, the 2030 Agenda will guide our efforts to ultimately eradicate poverty. But there should not be a one-size-fits-all approach in its implementation. Strategies for poverty eradication towards sustainable development should be tailored to meet unique needs, priorities, and particular social, economic, and cultural background of each region and country. In Southeast Asia, poverty eradication and rural development are intricately linked, as nearly 70% of poor live in rural areas. This is why ASEAN implements the Framework Action Plan on Rural Development and Poverty Eradication with 6 priority areas for 2016-2020, namely rural economic growth, social protection and safety nets, development of infrastructure and human resources in rural and peri-urban areas, public-private people partnership for rural development and poverty eradication, resilience of the poor and vulnerable groups to economic and environmental risk, and monitoring and evaluation. Second, it's important for any comprehensive strategy to address poverty in all its forms and dimensions, to reach the farthest behind, and to build resilience against potential shocks such as economic instability, food insecurity, or climate change. Thus, the ASEAN Framework Action Plan is complemented by a number of regional policies, programs, and initiatives. Last year, ASEAN ministers adopted the Strategic Framework on Social Welfare and Development 2016-2020, which includes a primary focus on children, persons with disabilities, and older persons, and new issues relating to family, social work, and vulnerable groups. To realize ASEAN declarations on strengthening social protection, we are implementing a regional framework and plan of action as enabling tools for strengthening cross-sectoral collaboration in social protection. A series of policy exchange activities on the welfare of persons with disabilities and care for older persons were convened in 2016, including the ASEAN Conference on Program Evaluation of Persons with Disabilities, the ASEAN +2 Regional Conference on Age-Friendly Environments, and Conference on Caring for Elderly in ASEAN +3, Research and Policy Challenges in Long-Term Care. Last August, the first 5-year ASEAN Work Plan on Youth 2016-2020 was adopted with 5 major areas of cooperation, namely youth entrepreneurship, youth employability, enhancing awareness and appreciations of an ASEAN community, youth involvement and participation, and youth competencies and resilience. We are also working with the ASEAN Youth Development Index, which will assist ASEAN member states to keep track on the evaluation of the outcomes and effectiveness of youth initiatives. During the 27th and 28th ASEAN summits, our labor leaders adopted the Vientiane Declaration on Transition from Informal Employment to Formal Employment towards decent work promotions in ASEAN, with a view to addressing the prevalence of informal employment in the region and creating more decent works. ASEAN strongly believes in national ownership in eradicating poverty and sustainable development, but we also believe that more can be achieved through participations and partnerships. It is important to note that ASEAN Social Cultural Community Blueprint 2025 benefited from extensive regional and national consultations with ASEAN organs and sectoral bodies, civil society organizations, as well as academies and institutions. Regional fora, including ASEAN Forum on Rural Development and Poverty Eradication and ASEAN Government Organization Non-Government Organizations Forum on Social Welfare and Development, are organized annually to exchange views on regional and national strategies and good practices. Last October, 10 NGOs received the second ASEAN Leadership Award on Rural Development and Poverty Eradication for their outstanding achievements and contributions to poverty reduction and development with local communities. While promoting public-private partnership as an important tool for harnessing a private sector expertise and provision of additional sources of funding for poverty eradication and sustainable development, ASEAN also continues strengthening its relations with international partners substantially. In particular, the ASEAN UN Plan of Action for 2016-2020 to implement the Joint Declaration on the Comprehensive Partnership between ASEAN and the UN was adopted during the 8th ASEAN UN Summit, which has a strong focus on achieving the twin goals of implementing the 2030 Agenda and ASEAN Community Vision 2025 and its blueprints. In this connection, ASEAN calls for strengthened global partnership, including through the fulfillment of ODA commitments, enhancing capacity building and technology transfer, and creating favorable conditions for developing countries, particularly MDCs, LLDCs, CIS, and MICs, in formulating and implementing strategies for poverty eradication to achieve sustainable development for all. Mr. Chair, to conclude, ASEAN reaffirms its commitment to support the work of the Commission for Social Development in realizing the social dimensions of the Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development, including poverty eradication. We also reiterate our commitment to fully realize an inclusive and harmonious community that promotes the well-being, livelihood, and welfare of all ASEAN peoples. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished permanent representative of Vietnam for her statement and also for the extraordinary discipline with regard to the time limit. Thank you very much. Now it is my honor to give the floor to Her Excellency Mrs. Ana Elena Chacon, Vice President of Costa Rica, who will be speaking on behalf of the Group of Friends of Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. You have the floor, Madam.
President, I have the honor and the pleasure to speak on behalf of the members state of the Group of Friends of Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, Argentina, Belgium, Bolivia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Cabo Verde, Ecuador, El Salvador, Finland, France, Italy, Mongolia, Montenegro, Portugal, Spain, Uruguay, and my own country, Costa Rica. It has been a long way since the World Conference on Human Rights in Vienna reaffirmed the principles already included in the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, that all human rights are universal, indivisible, interdependent, and interrelated, and must be treated in a fair and equal manner on the same footing and with the same emphasis. However, in spite of the achievement made over the last 4 decades, still many countries left behind, and within those countries, large social groups are left behind, and the goal inequalities that points to serious challenge in our commitment to the universality of human rights. In human rights terms, poverty is both a symptom and a cause. Continuing severe deprivation is a sign of those affected and living in the state of indignity and thus denial of rights, and the poor and marginalized and deprived all above of the capacity to claim their rights. The dignity of the human rights person needs to be center of any process of sustainable development. In this is the focus we would like to highlight here today. To be sustainable, development needs on the envisage of human rights being his and her potential, and not a passive beneficiary of a state of action. That is a genuine agent of change. One of the most potentially transformative elements of 2030 Agenda is the commitment to leave no one behind, which means that people are the ones at the center of the sustainable development, human beings who are entitled to certain basic living conditions and to empower so they can be able to fulfill the extent of the human potential. The 2030 Agenda of Sustainable Development, its goals and targets are direct and indirect globally related to the fulfillment of economic, social, and cultural rights, being several goals focused more specific on important economic and social rights such as poverty, Goal 1, food and nutrition, Goal 2, health, Goal 3, education, Goal 4, water and sanitation, Goal 6, and inequality, Goal 10. However, the realization of economic, social, and cultural rights is still only a mirage for millions of persons, putting at stake the achievement of the true sustainable development, furthermore addressing and reducing inequalities and promoting policies focused on young, older persons, persons with disabilities, minorities, and migrants, and to help overcome the challenges women and girls still face and a paramount of importance to foster social inclusion and inclusive development. Frequently, people living in extreme poverty and underdevelopment have neither the political power nor the material and education opportunities to take their destiny on their own hands. In this sense, the full realization of all human rights is a fundamental step towards change, empowerment, development, and human dignity. We have now to move on an effective implementation, respecting, promoting, protecting, fulfilling, enforcing economic, social, and cultural rights require governments to take positive action. The challenges in the field of economic, social, and cultural rights is to graduate national compliance with organizations emanating from international commitments, in particular the 2030 Agenda of Sustainable Development. Finally, I would like to highlight the legitimate and vital role played by civil society organizations and other relevant stakeholders in promoting human rights and specifically economic, social, and cultural rights. Attaining sustainable development is a work in progress everywhere in the world, and it demands a collective commitment from all of us. The group of friends of the ESCR will continue being a strong advocate for the promotion and protection of human rights, in particular the economic, social, and cultural rights, including the context of the implementation of the 2030 Agenda of Sustainable Development. Thank you very much, Mr. President. I will continue now with my participation. Quisiera de nuevo...
I wish now to once again thank you and say that my delegation is delighted to see you as the chair of this commission, and we wish both you and the rest of the Bureau every success as you discharge your mandate. Costa Rica wishes to endorse the statement made by Ecuador on behalf of G77 plus China. This statement will, El Salvador, and we endorse the statement which will be made by El Salvador on behalf of CELAC. In Costa Rica, we look to achieve full development through the National Poverty Reduction Strategy. This is an instrument designed by the government of my country with a view to meeting the needs of families most greatly exposed to vulnerability. This strategy is entirely in line with the mandate bestowed upon us by Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development. This tool was Costa Rica's ambitious tool to eradicate poverty and extreme poverty. It is a strategy which we are closely monitoring and one whose development we are keeping a close eye on. We issue quarterly reports as part of this strategy with a view to ultimately honing it. This is an inclusive strategy which covers various categories of people: persons with disabilities, women. We also place emphasis on children and childhood in general, adolescents. We pay particular attention to people who've been abandoned and who are living in the street, indigenous peoples, peoples of African descent, and refugees. These are just some of the categories focused on by this strategy. On the 12th of September, the National Bridge to Development Strategy was praised by the World Bank because it was said it had increase the efficiency of social spending, and the World Bank also praised its holistic nature. I'd like to point to a number of figures which demonstrate how poverty has decreased in poverty. Under this administration, we're very proud of this reduction in poverty. In 2016, poverty levels decreased to their lowest level in the last 7 years, according to data issued by the National Institute of Statistics and Censuses. In the last 2 years, poverty has decreased regardless of the way in which it is measured. If you use the traditional criteria of income, poverty decreased from 22.3% of homes in 2015 to 20.5% of homes in 2016. And if the new multidimensional poverty index is used to measure poverty, poverty decreased from 21.7% in 2015 to 20.5% in 2016. Moreover, if traditional measurements are used, extreme poverty decreased from 7.2% to 6.3% in this same period of time. 10,400 homes emerged from poverty. This amounts to 23,000 persons. The same thing happened with 9,700 homes living in extreme poverty. And this amounts to almost 31,000 persons. These people are no longer living in extreme vulnerability. It is quite clear that Costa Rica is walking willfully towards the creation of a society which is more respectful of human rights, which is more inclusive and fairer in nature. We use public policy and tangible actions to honor our commitments to fulfilling the SDGs and the commitments outlined in the 2030 Agenda. This is the utopian vision for which we continue to strive. Many thanks, Chair. I would like to thank the distinguished Vice President of Costa Rica for those statements, the statement one on behalf of the group and the other made in a national capacity. Thank you.
To Her Excellency Ms. Sophie Karmasin, Federal Minister for Family and Youth of Austria. You have the floor, Madam.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to address you at this session of the Commission for Social Development. We consider the priority theme for this session, strategies for eradicating poverty, as important for that it allows exchanging views on approaches to sustainable development and in discussing actual measures to end poverty. War, famine and natural disasters in one region can have direct impacts on countries of other regions around the world. We can no longer deny the globalized, interlinked world we live in. No country can deal with today's problems alone. This makes the Sustainable Development Goals so important. As a set of universal objectives, they guide towards our goal to make this world a better place. Austria is deeply committed to implementing the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Under the leadership of the Federal Ministry for Foreign Affairs and the Federal Chancellery, a stock-taking process took place throughout all Austrian ministries. A catalogue on all sub-goals was defined, and the first interim report is expected to be published this year. As Austria's Federal Minister for Families and Youth, I would like to focus my intervention on families, children and young people. For I am deeply convinced that the fight against worldwide poverty can only be won if we start by improving the lives of our children. I would like to draw your attention to 4 key aspects that, in my opinion, need to be considered when developing policies of all kinds. First, reducing poverty requires inclusive growth to guarantee that no one is left behind. We need to put families at the center of our economic policies. A family-friendly environment makes a huge difference and can therefore be seen as a competitive advantage of any business location. In Austria, we have developed a network called Companies for Families. It is a network for all of those companies that regard family friendliness as a business factor and want to develop in this area. Creating a family-friendly environment also means combating gender-related inequality. Many young mothers in Austria and around the world who have years of valuable and expensive education and work experience quit their jobs and careers after giving birth and only come back with part-time contracts. For companies, it is very hard to compensate this phase and also difficult to offer adequate jobs after maternity or paternity leave. In many cases, women are no longer financially independent and suffer from financial difficulties when they retire or when they get divorced. In order to support women in getting back to work after giving birth and to promote gender equality, the Austrian Ministry of Families and Youth allocated a big share of its budget to increase the number of childcare places and introduced a financial bonus for fathers who take paternity leave. Second, poverty eradication depends on the availability of decent employment. The financial crisis has left its toll around the world. Although countries are recovering from the consequences of this crisis, youth unemployment is still high. Austria fully aligns itself with the statement made by the representative of Malta on behalf of the European Union. The EU-wide Youth Guarantee is an excellent tool for reducing youth unemployment. Through the youth guarantees, member states ensure that all young people under the age of 25 receive continued education or new employment offers within a period of 4 months of becoming unemployed or leaving formal education. Digitalization will also be increasingly important. Everything that can be digitalized will be digitalized, and this process will continue to disrupt entire industrial sectors completely. Digital competence is an important skill most employers seek, and it goes hand in hand with lifelong learning. We need to make sure that we equip our students with the right technical skills and hardware to make them fit for the labor market. Austria will launch the so-called Future Learning Lab later this year on, a public study room featuring digital equipment where teachers can try out new technologies and develop learning scenarios based on ICTs for their classrooms. By making sure that skills and education of our youth meet the requirements of the job market, and by teaching them entrepreneurial skills from an early age on, we can lay the foundation for full and productive employment. Third, economic growth is reached by investing in people and by ensuring that no one is left behind. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development promises to leave no one behind. Marginalized groups, such as people with disabilities, older persons, women, native people, and migrants, as well as refugees, have higher risk of facing poverty if they are not supported adequately. Providing social protection is crucial if we really want to ensure that no one is left behind. Austria has an extensive social protection system which consists of both tax policies and social transfers and taxation. A recent study showed that family transfers were eradicated, the poverty rate in Austria would rise by 4 percentage points. Social transfers also have a direct impact on them diminishing different aspects of social exclusion, such as giving people access to better healthcare and allowing for leisure activities. All strategies promoting poverty reduction will need to put youth at the core. The fourth key point is the multi-stakeholder partnerships are everything when it comes to poverty eradication. As I mentioned already before, no country can stem today's challenges by itself. Austria is committed to support other member states through its development cooperation programs and by underwriting multilateral loan facilities from development banks. However, effective poverty reduction requires involving stakeholders at all levels to contribute to development efforts. Our Companies for Family network is one good example. Austria has introduced numerous mechanisms to involve young people in decision-making processes. Changing its electoral system to lower the required age for voting in national elections to 16 is just one of them. Mr. Chair, let me conclude by stressing once more that sustainable development starts with children and ends with children. It starts with children because they are the leverage for breaking the cycle of poverty, malnutrition and lack of education that is being passed on from one generation to the next. It ends with children because healthy and educated children are the foundation for a sound, inclusive and sustainable economic environment. Let me thank you once again to give me the opportunity to share my thoughts with you. Thank you very much.
I thank the distinguished Federal Minister for Family and Youth of Austria for her statement. And it is now my honor to give the floor to His Excellency, Mr. Nom Toybayar Niam Taishir, Minister of Labor and Social Protection of Mongolia. You have the floor, sir.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman and ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, I wish to express my appreciation to the Secretary General for a report on the strategies for eradicating poverty to achieve sustainable development for all. The government of Mongolia attaches a great importance to the implementation of the ambitious goals of SDGs, and I wish to state its strong commitment to achieving SDGs by 2030. Mongolia aims to be one of the leading middle-income countries that has eradicated poverty in all its forms and preserves the ecological balance while continuing to build strong and stable country. Mr. Chairman, with this view, we applied SDGs into concrete government policies and plans and budgets for actual implementation by adopting Mongolia's 2030 Sustainable Development Vision, which charts the country's development path for the next decade. In fact, each and every concept of SDG is integrated in the action plan of Government of Mongolia 2016 to 2020. We are committed to our plan and allocated the required budget, adopted intersector program in implementation and development policy for reducing poverty. Instability and unemployment are the beginning of every problem, including poverty. Even the air pollution is caused by the poverty. The framework of this action plan is focused on establishing a sustainable national economic policy that collaborated with national and international economical trends and sustainable implementation system that absolutely sovereign from the political influence. To ensure economic stability, a new law on national development recently adopted by the Mongolian Parliament. Sustainable economic growth will create jobs and shift people from welfare beneficiaries to contributors to achieve SDGs. In particular, to ensure development is not leaving anyone behind, and the action plans required target the furthest behind the first. Mr. Chairman, from our lessons learned, we would like to highlight that youth investment will be a shortcut to achieve SDGs. Mongolia is a country of youth. Almost 65% of our population is under age 40. We strongly believe that by investing in youth, we will not only prevent many challenges described in SDGs, but also create compatible, active citizens with positive mind that will contribute to implementation of SDGs in Mongolia. I would like to express our gratitude to the UNFPA, Swiss agencies for development and cooperation, and the government of Luxembourg for financing and implementing projects on youth development in Mongolia. Our partners recognize the great potential of young people in society as the future leaders of Mongolia and support young people reach their full potential to become responsible, productive citizens who can make a positive contribution to their community and the country. Under this project, 16 local youth development centers and health clinics has been established so far. In 2015, Mongolia hosted One Asia, 13th Asian Youth Council General Assembly focused on youth involvement in sustainable development goals, with more than 1,000 representatives of 25 countries of Asia, involving stakeholders, civil society, private sectors, and international community to remark significant consideration given to youth's role in shaping and achieving these future targets and filling the remaining gaps, in particular relating to youth issues in SDGs. As a result, the Declaration of Ulaanbaatar was adopted and sent to the United Nations as recommendations. We use these recommendations for a cornerstone of our youth development system, such as draft youth development law, national youth policy, and the national youth program within the framework of promoting youth development within 5 main policies. This law will allow youths to get a healthcare system, support for education, employment, and youth participation on decision-making by providing friendly environment for youth to self-development and living healthy and productive life. This makes Mongolia one of the few countries who will achieve SDGs through youth development strategy. Yes, we strongly encourage the shortcut to SDGs support for youth, and we welcome you to share our experiences and lessons learned. Mr. Chairman, Mongolia has been classified for the first time as a high human development country in UNDP's Human Development Index. However, with 1 in 5 people living below poverty line, poverty remains a challenge, and we are experiencing financial and economic difficulties. During this difficult time, youth and the vulnerable groups are most fragile. The unemployment of youth people as high as 60% of the total unemployment rate. We have been implementing employment support programs to align with the labor market needs and improve the skills of vocational education and training institutions' graduates' skill. The program requires additional financial and human resources to make it successful. Finally, I wish to thank the United Nations and other donors for your cooperation and support to the government of Mongolia in advancing our social development objectives. Thank you very much.
I thank the distinguished Minister of Labor and Social Protection of Mongolia for his statement. Thank you, especially I hear you coming straight from the airport, so thank you. And it's now my honor to give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Alberto Beltrame, Vice Minister of Social and Agrarian Development of Brazil. You have the floor, sir.
Mr. President, as Vice Minister of Social and Agrarian Development of Brazil, it is a pleasure to participate in this session of the United Nations Commission for Social Development. Economic growth based on social exclusion and inequality renders sustainable development impossible. Brazil has managed to make significant progress in this regard. Since the 1988 Constitution, Brazil has been making consistent efforts in order to advance in social inclusion and the reduction of inequalities through a rights-based approach. Since then, we have overcome extreme poverty, reduced child mortality, and are officially out of the FAO hunger map. These accomplishments are the result of efforts of all Brazilians. They inspire a commitment by President Michel Temer's government to maintain the achievements and promote the improvement and advancement of social policies. We have to keep moving forward on the understanding that poverty is multidimensional, and the policies to address it must be socially sustainable. My presence here reinforces this vision, as well as our commitment to the Sustainable Development Goals. Brazil began implementing its unified social assistance system some 20 years ago, with a fair, generous and innovative conception. The system has been built on a democratic basis, involving all levels of government and with broad civil society participation. The system is present in the whole national territory and is the main gateway to the diverse number of social policies that we undertake. Among these, I begin by highlighting our signature policy, the Bolsa Familia program. As a result of the restructuring of previous cash transfer programs, Bolsa Familia complements the income of 13,600,000 families, promoting immediate financial relief to 50 million Brazilians living in poverty. By means of its educational, health and social assistance conditionalities, the program encourages beneficiaries to access basic rights. In 2016, President Michel Temer and Minister Osmar Terra updated the program and raised the benefits value by 12.5%, the first raise in 2 years. Currently, the federal government's investment in the program amounts to $9 billion per year. Key to the implementation of cash transfer programs, the United Registry for Social Policies contains disaggregated data of 28 million low-income families, encompassing 80 million people. The registry is the platform that allows the government to maintain 20 social programs in areas such as housing, the fight against child labour, access to electricity, and sanitation. Another main feature of the Unified Social Assistance System is the welfare benefit, which guarantees the payment of a minimum salary to 4,400,000 elderly people and people with disabilities who do not have the means to support themselves. Brazil invests $16 billion in this benefit every year, almost twice as much as is invested in Bolsa Familia. Brazil has been making notable progress in income distribution and, thus, has the largest increase in the Human Development Index in Latin America over the last 20 years. All these outcomes represent relevant achievements, but we need to keep advancing. The income transfer strategies are important, but they are not enough. It is necessary to develop public policies that are capable of breaking the perverse cycle of intergenerational reproduction of poverty and promoting the productive inclusion of the vulnerable population. Besides the preservation of social policies, our great challenge is to create opportunities for human development and for the inclusion of individuals in the labour market, as well as in income generation processes. We want to promote independent citizens capable of truly emancipating themselves, generating their own income, and also conducting their own lives and destinies. With this goal in sight, the Temer administration in 2016 launched the Happy Child programme. We developed the programme based on the understanding that the first 1,000 days of life are decisive for the development of human, emotional, cognitive and neuropsychomotor skills in the future. Children that are cared for, protected, loved and stimulated will be better prepared for life and capable of seizing better opportunities in the future. Their childhood is a window of opportunity for the breaking up of the intergenerational transmission of poverty, which tends to perpetuate it. The programme will support families in the promotion of child development and the strengthening of family and community bonds, in addition to reinforcing the access to health, education, culture and human rights. As many as 530,000 children will be monitored in 2017 and 1.5 million in the next year, all from families that receive Bolsa Familia. In addition, the Brazilian government will launch this year the National Strategy for Social and Productive Inclusion. Its goal is to develop capacities and encourage people's involvement in work and income-generating activities. Professional training and access to microcredit will be important tools for the strategy. Chairman, in the Food and Nutrition Security Agenda, guided by the purpose of guaranteeing the human right to adequate food for all Brazilians, we have achieved the hunger reduction goals established by the World Food Summit and the Millennium Development Goals. It is our priority to implement the agenda of the UN Decade of Action on Nutrition and the Nutrition for Growth initiative, to which Brazil is a signatory. Finally, we are all living through difficult times, with a flagging international economy and looming social tensions. As demonstrated by history, it is precisely in times like these that social policies become even more important for sustainable development, for peace, and also for human rights. Despite all our challenging circumstances, Brazil will not only maintain but also increase its focus on social policies. Hopefully, we can all maintain our commitment to a common future. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished Vice Minister of Social and Agrarian Development of Brazil for his statement, and it is now my honor to give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Alexei Cherkasov, Deputy Minister for Labor and Social Protection of the Russian Federation. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Chairman. The Russian Federation, like other countries, has moved to practical implementation of the Sustainable Development Agenda for 2030. This document opens new horizons in areas such as the eradication of poverty, economic growth, the creation of dignified workplaces, and has also facilitated the creation of economic models that will serve the interests of people and also the development of human potential. We are convinced that in the new reality that we face, the Commission of Social Development can work as an effective coordinator within the UN on a whole range of questions of social development, including guaranteeing equal opportunities for persons with a disability and also addressing issues of ageing, besides increasing the good position for young people and consolidating the role of the family. All of these are very important. Activity in this area will not only help to implement the provisions of the World Summit for Social Development from Copenhagen in 1995 and also the 24th Special Session of the UN General Assembly, but it will also make a substantive contribution to implementing the 2030 Agenda. Chairman, as we know, one of the main aims for the global community is cutting poverty. Money income to the population has an influence on motivation to work. It also determines demand among the population and ultimately the speed of economic development. The documents of the Commission repeatedly emphasise the importance of integrating social objectives with the bases of macroeconomic policy. In Russia, extreme poverty was eradicated back in 2013. However, this doesn't mean that all problems have been solved. For us, as for other countries, the group at the highest risk of poverty includes families with children, older people, people of working age not in regular paid employment, namely the unemployed, people outside economic activity, and also people with disabilities. We devote particular attention to these groups of citizens. By way of example, I can say that the overall expenditure from the budget at all levels on social policy has increased in Russia over the past 5 years by almost 37%, and expenditure on protecting families and children by almost twofold. A significant role in overcoming poverty among pensioners has been played by something introduced in 2010, namely a supplement to the pension to bring it up to a subsistence minimum. Chairman, the employment situation remains stable. According to the ILO classification, unemployment covers 5.6% of our working population. This indicator is lower than the global average and also lower than the average in OECD countries and the EU. One of our priorities is cutting unemployment among young people. We've been able to deal rather successfully with this problem thanks to state and also regional programs for employment, stipulating measures such as additional professional training and also retraining, as well as internships involving mentors and job markets. We're also working consistently to facilitate jobs for people with disabilities. There's been a draft federal law prepared which defines the specifics of organising employment for people with disabilities. We plan to create a mechanism that will help facilitate jobs for people with disabilities so that they are provided with individual assistance in making sure that the conditions that are necessary for their employment are met. A serious socioeconomic problem is the number of citizens who do not have legal sources of income. Now more than 21 million people are working unofficially. This is more than 23% of our working population. According to our views, approximately 15 million of these people are working in the shadow economy, working without proper labour relations, which also has a negative impact on the country's budget. Currently, consistent with a resolution of the President of the Russian Federation, we are trying to define the legal status of self-employed citizens. One of the specifics of poverty in Russia is the prevalence of low-paid and also low-output workplaces. To deal with this, we are gradually increasing the minimum wage. Last year, it was increased by 21%, and also increasing pay to specialists who are financed from the budget. These include doctors, teachers, and other categories. Chairman, within the country, we're also devoting a lot of attention to social protection. Recently, we've seen a trend to target the assistance given to citizens. Many regions are suffering from this point of view and moving to a transition to giving help only to those areas of the population that really need it. This economy is used to increase the help given to the poorest areas of the population. From 2018 onwards, the Russian Federation will launch a single social protection information system, which will cover all of the different social obligations that the state holds at federal and also at regional levels. This system will allow us to consider all of the state's expenditure and to set aside any doubling of efforts or any inefficiencies. We also want to help citizens without a permanent place of residence or permanent employment. For them, special institutions have been set up, including refuges and centres of adaptation, which will help them to register and get their documents in order, and also to find somewhere to live. It will also establish whether they are entitled to a pension or disability benefits. Every year we are working hard on this work, and including non-governmental organisations and so on. These organisations provide financial support, are provided through budgetary allocations. The Russian Federation's different entities are working at the moment on a plan and measures to develop volunteer contributions in this area. In conclusion, I'd like to note that the Russian Federation on the whole supports the recommendations of the thematic report of the UN Secretary General on this priority subject in the current session of this Commission, in particular on those areas on the need to consolidate human potential by investing in a system of healthcare and education, and also on earmarking sufficient resources to improve the position of people living under the poverty line. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished Deputy Minister for Labour and Social Protection of the Russian Federation for his statement. And it is now my honor to give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Héctor Ramón Cadenas Molinas, Executive Secretary of the Secretariat for Social Action of Paraguay. Tiene usted la palabra, señor.
Muy buenos días, señor.
Good morning to you all, Chair. This 1 year ago, the Sustainable Development Goals entered into force, and these were agreed upon at the historical summit convened by the United Nations. And after adopting those commitments, we must reaffirm our commitment to stepping up efforts made at country level to eradicate poverty in all its forms. Also, our commitment to reducing inequality and fighting against climate change. And in doing all this, we wish to ensure that no one is left behind. With these goals in mind, we agreed upon a 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which look to uphold economic, social and cultural as well as environmental rights. These cannot be excluded and left behind. At the same time, we need to overcome the challenge involved in uniting political will and will in general to produce more sustainable and inclusive societies. In Paraguay, we chose to implement public policies, plans and programs which will achieve development which includes every citizen without any discrimination made. Our country has moved towards creating a more inclusive society, and this is shown by our outcomes in terms of furthering social protection, and we have seen a sustained decrease in poverty. Poverty has decreased by 10% in the last 5 years. It has reduced from 32.43% in 2011 to 22.24% in 2015. Extreme poverty has also decreased from 18 to 10%. This data demonstrates that we have been able to pull thousands of families out of poverty. But nevertheless, we must continue to move along this path. But in addition to this challenge, we must also overcome that challenge, the challenge of ensuring that people who have emerged from poverty do not once again fall within its clutches. To pursue these goals, we have the National Development Plan for 2030. This plan establishes strategies to ensure that people are able to actively participate in constructing a prosperous society which is properly cohesive and fair, and to ensure that they can enjoy its benefits. The first part of this strategy is the Poverty Reduction and Social Development arm. This arm includes priority initiatives including conditional cash transfers, school feeding programs, and food benefits for elderly peoples. There is also the National Poverty Reduction Programme called Sowing the Seeds of Opportunity. At the same time, we have a robust programme in place looking to build affordable housing and protect the social good. This programme prioritises families on low incomes. We have the Secretariat for Social Action. This is an institution of which I am at the helm, and here we've made significant progress in terms of making policy adjustments and refining already implemented social programs. We have incorporated cross-cutting issues into our work and focused on indigenous peoples and disabled persons. Our ultimate aim is to improve our work targeting the specific needs of these peoples. Moreover, important progress has been made in strengthening our institutions. We have obtained the ISO certificate ISO 9001 for key emblematic programs which focus on meeting the needs of people living in poverty. As regards the issue that brings us here today, allow me, Chair, to focus my statement on achievements made with the implementation of the Tekopora program, and allow me to point to the fact we have supplemented this with the Tenondora program, and our aim is to ensure sustainable eradication of poverty. We have the Tekopora program, which looks to provide cash transfers, responsible cash transfers, and its ultimate aim is to provide social protection to homes living in poverty and to promote their ability to access their rights to food, health, and education. Its other aim is to ensure that access to other rights can be enabled as a corollary, and also that community fabric can be strengthened. This program, Tekopora, is currently targeting 141,399 families, and its coverage has been increased over the last 3 years, and this is an important step forward in pursuing the goal of eradicating poverty. All the departments of our country see this program rolled out, and it targets 76% of its beneficiaries are women. The Tenondera program for economic inclusion and productive inclusion looks to provide economic incentives, capacity building and support in order to launch or bolster productive enterprises. Its priority is families who are already being reached by the Tekopora program. We've had a core assistance program and worked on the understanding that families have to have the capacities they need to actively emerge from poverty themselves. 75% of families are headed up by women. 75% of the families covered by this Tenondera program. It also focuses on indigenous families. We've received many testimonies during the monitoring process of this program from its beneficiaries. These beneficiaries point to the fact the program has a positive impact on allowing families to emerge from poverty in a situation of vulnerability. Testimonies have also stated that this program combats poverty, but that it's also a vital component of social protection and a tool in ensuring economic inclusion, because it develops people's capacities to overcome their own limitations and the restrictions which impede their survival and enjoyment of rights. Moreover, I'd like to point to the impact of the Tekopora program insofar as it has been evaluated in the 2016. In 2016, it's had important impact in reducing maternal mortality, among other things. There are other institutions that have been important in evaluating the impact of economic and social policies on poverty reduction and the reduction of vulnerability. These institutions include health and education providers, as well as ministries working in the field of agriculture, livestock rearing and industry. In this vein, the Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock provides technical assistance to farmers. They provide agricultural outreach programs to communities, indigenous areas, etc., etc. They provide technical assistance and credit. Nevertheless, we have made progress in social issues in Paraguay, but a great deal remains to be done, particularly regarding strengthening institutions in the social sphere. Here it is necessary to avoid a situation whereby we have piecemeal interventions. We need to ensure all sectors are joined up and that institutions work together at a territorial and central level. This is particularly important with health, education and work. All of this joined up work is a sine qua non if we are to continue to extend the coverage of our programs and ensure that we properly take into account the needs of various groups of our populations. Working on poverty reduction strategy is important, and all the more important given that we need to create mechanisms if we are to ensure that poverty is eradicated once and for all. Emerging from poverty involves creating opportunities for work and productive enterprises. We must also design and redesign, monitor and evaluate our social interventions. By way of conclusion, we wish to reaffirm our commitment to the work of the Commission for Social Development. We need to actively participate and focus our work on ensuring the proper implementation of the social dimension of Agenda 2030. This Commission's work is pivotal in analysing social policies. Consequently, it is necessary to discuss realistic ways in which we can, in the short term, eradicate the obstacles we are facing as states in the social sphere. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished Executive Secretary of the Secretariat for Social Action of Paraguay for his statement, and it is now my honor to give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Mohamed Said Silapov, Deputy Minister of Labor and Social Protection of Population of Turkmenistan.
Chairman, allow me to begin by congratulating you and the members of the Commission's Bureau on their election and to wish you every success in this current session. This is the third year that Turkmenistan has taken part in the Commission in its work of its regular session that has great significance for the period when we are trying to implement the Sustainable Development Goals. Virtually immediately after the UN summit, we moved to adaptation of these goals, especially guaranteeing a balanced economy and also the socio-economic components of sustainable development. The key ministries and agencies work together with UN agencies of the UN and carried out consultations on the adoption of the 17 goals and the 169 targets. We also developed corresponding indicators. These cover the priority areas of development in our state. These indicators were then officially adopted by the government of Turkmenistan in September 2016. Currently, all of our work is targeted on integrating these approved goals, targets and indicators into national programs, as well as into targeted sectoral plans and strategies, and on developing a system to measure the progress towards the implementation of the SDGs. The Community of Nations has adopted a range of documents where it is stated that the main goal of social progress and development is the constant increasing of the material and spiritual level of life of all citizens in our society, while also respecting and implementing the rights and fundamental freedoms of human beings. It is not for no reason that I've mentioned these signs of social progress as adopted by the international community, and that is because Turkmenistan supports the general strategy and also takes part in the implementation of the goals adopted by the United Nations. On the 14th of September 2016, we adopted a new version of the Turkmen Constitution, which stipulates standards on the priorities for these commonly recognized principles of international law. This is a consequence of Turkmenistan's membership of authoritative international organizations and also our accession to the main international treaties and conventions. Certain articles in the main section of the Constitution were broadened, as a result of which we dealt with the issue of implementing international conventions on human rights. At the same time, in our basic law, we also have the constitutional anchoring of something established in Turkmenistan, namely the Institute of the Ombudsman of Human Rights. On the 23rd of November 2016, a law was adopted in Turkmenistan on the Ombudsman, who will facilitate implementing increased rights and also guaranteeing the legal interests of our citizens. To implement the objectives stemming from our National Plan of Action on human rights in Turkmenistan for 2016 to 2020, there was a resolution of the President of March 2016, which established a national plan of action to fight against human trafficking for 2016 to 2018, in particular guaranteeing the rights and freedoms of people and also consolidating the socio-economic protection of people. It also dealt with human trafficking. Currently, we are looking at a draft national plan of action for children and also a national plan of action on human rights. The achievement of economic results through better use of our labour forces and the growth of productivity is also a priority. Here, we should note something that was adopted in June 2016. This was a law on the employment of the population, and also there was a programme on improving the system of labour employment and creating new jobs by 2020. One of the priorities of our foreign policy is working together with international organisations, and we consider our policy neutral. To deal with economic, social, cultural and other objectives, Turkmenistan unswervingly values the support of the UN and also its programmes, agencies and funds. Evidence of this is the signing in 2016 between the UN and the government of Turkmenistan of a framework programme with the aim of developing partnership for 2016 to 2020. Allow me to express our confidence that the current session will facilitate further increased dialogue between Turkmenistan and the agencies of the UN to develop joint programmes to achieve the global development goals for the whole of humanity. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished Deputy Minister of Labour and Social Protection of Population of Turkmenistan for his statement, and I now give the floor to Her Excellency Ms. Ana Sofia Antunes, Secretary of State for the Inclusion of Persons with Disabilities of Portugal. You have the floor, ma'am.
Obrigada.
Thank you. I'd like to compliment you, Chairman, and the Commission, and also the distinguished colleagues. Portugal aligns itself with the statement made earlier by the representative of Malta on behalf of the European Union. It is a great honour for me to address you and the participants in this 55th session of the Commission for Social Development, not only because Portugal has for a long time contributed actively to its work, but also because it is the first time I address you after the election of Portugal as one of the 40 members of this Commission. As the Portuguese State Secretary for the Inclusion of Persons with Disabilities, I am deeply committed to the work of this Commission that devotes particular attention to the situation of vulnerable groups. The poverty is a multidimensional phenomenon that may acquire different forms in different regions of the world, but has one common consequence. It deprives women and men, girls and boys, from fulfilling their potential and their well-being. Therefore, poverty eradication requires strategic, integrated and coherent measures at all levels, targeting groups such as persons with disabilities, migrants, refugees, and also persons from ethnic and religious minority groups. In Portugal, as an example of an integrated and coherent measure under consideration to combat poverty among vulnerable groups, I would like to refer to a new social benefit for persons with a duly certified disability or incapacity of 60% or more. It will promote life with dignity and independent living. It is a benefit with a life cycle perspective that will be adjusted to the different needs persons with disabilities face at different stages of their lives. It will allow them to live in independence and dignity. In Portugal, the long-term unemployed that face particular difficulties in returning to the job market, especially those over 50 years of age, are one of our priorities. But today, for many working poor, work does not mean a decent salary, nor just working conditions, nor adequate social protection. They deserve special attention. We need to work towards a sustainable system of basic income guarantee.
De uma situação de pobreza.
Does not mean that we are for eradicating the problem of poverty as we need to do. Sometimes work does not provide sufficient income to eradicate poverty, and thus there needs to be additional social support provided. We must continue to pursue the implementation of a sustainable model for minimum guarantees, minimum benefits, minimum incomes. We're working on that, and that will mean that by 2019, hopefully we'll have a minimum income across Portugal of €600. Here I wish to underscore Portugal's commitment to achieving these sustainable development goals in the Agenda 2030. Insofar as these goals are universal, indivisible, and they must be complied with and fulfilled for everyone in all areas of the world, particularly fulfilled for those who have traditionally been left the furthest behind. Complying with the Sustainable Development Goal 1, eradicating poverty in all of its forms, is something Portugal has been working on. In that connection, we are developing the following initiatives: a programme to fight against child poverty between now and 2030. There is our work to strengthen the implementation of a solidarity payment. Our aim is that this will be rolled out to an increasing number of peoples. We are also aiming to remodel the social intervention income and aiming to implement a strategy for the elimination of homelessness as a phenomenon. Chair, guaranteeing the well-being of elderly persons is a fundamental arm of our social development programs. In 2016, Portugal will host the next session of the Economic and Social Commission of Europe, the UN for Europe, their meeting on aging. This is a meeting which will be held on the 21st to the 22nd of September in Lisbon, and the title of this meeting will be Sustainable Development for All Societies. How can we guarantee a longer life? I'd like to point to 3 issues dealt with by this conference: the acknowledgement of the potential of elderly persons and intergenerational solidarity, the idea of encouraging a longer and more active working life, and that of guaranteeing aging with dignity. I wish to invite you all to attend this meeting in Lisbon in September. There will be government representatives, there will also be NGOs and specialists in these issues. I invite you all to attend so that together we can make progress and take significant strides forwards to eradicate poverty, this scourge that affects a particularly vulnerable group, which is elderly persons. To conclude, Chair, I'd like to say that our expectations for this session of the Commission on Social Development are high, and we hope that the documents that we negotiate and adopt here will be able to contribute to improving the social conditions of the most vulnerable groups of our society. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished Secretary of State for the Inclusion of Persons with Disabilities of Portugal for her statement. And it is now my honor to give the floor to Ms. Marie-Christine Bordure, Head of the Labour, Employment, Social Affairs and Human Rights Office, European and International Delegation, Ministry of Social Affairs of France. Vous avez la parole.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, France wholeheartedly subscribes to the declaration made by Malta on behalf of the European Union. The 2030 Agenda, which we have collectively committed to, puts us in front of challenges and stakes, including social development, which is a cross-cutting one. And these are decisive in the implementation of the SDGs, responding to the eradication of poverty as a challenge in a world characterized by economic dependence, where inequalities remain and even deepen, or where vulnerable populations are still vulnerable. All of this should lead us to particular vigilance in our commitments and our strategies for success. The work of the Social Development Commission is essential here. The approach taken by the French government is based on an integrated approach and also a tailor-made approach which will allow populations who are vulnerable to express their point of view, but also to devise tools that are tailored to the individual. The recession has been ongoing since 2008, but thanks to a proactive social policy, the poverty in our country has not increased, and France has maintained its Gini coefficient at being between 0.29 and 0.3. Our tool to achieve SDG 1 is the multi-annual plan to fight poverty and to promote social inclusion. The measures here should respond to the social situation and also structure our solidarity policies over the long term, consistent with a logic in social development, allowing us to prioritise access to education for the youngest, policies to support and train those in the most precarious situations, and also to promote policies to prevent social difficulties. The power of this plan is that it is being devised and also carried by the whole range of public and private stakeholders. Among the principles that guides France's approach, the principle of justice aims to take into account the phenomenon of people not exercising their social rights. France therefore launched something in January 2016, namely a mechanism, a premium, aiming to reinforce the resources of workers at the more modest levels, and more than 4 million people are already benefiting from it. This is an area aiming to facilitate access to social benefits. The principle of people in poverty contributing to drawing up and also monitoring public policies means that we have given the chance to people to enrich the policies that affect their daily lives. It allows people to play their role as citizens in a fully fledged manner and is therefore a means of empowerment. It's also a question for us of anticipating the developments that might lead to social exclusion and then poverty. Thus, digitisation of jobs, which may or may not have an impact on jobs, but we don't really know yet, might bring with it the eradication of jobs for those who have few or no qualifications. And that means that it's important that we organise lifelong learning. The French government has launched an innovative mechanism which is tailored to the person and not to the job. This is to support each person, regardless of their status and their initial training, in their professional lives. This is a durable tool for empowerment and social promotion and responds to the issue of careers that are difficult to carry out. We bring together the whole range of social rights, and it bears with it the demands for social justice with reinforced rights for those who have the greatest need of them. Thus, young people who leave school without qualifications can receive training for free, and that's a right that they can exercise. It's a right to a second chance for underqualified young people, which goes together with the youth guarantee. This means support in getting into a job and also support from companies. There's another reform that's been engaged in by the French government for 16 to 25-year-olds who are vulnerable in the job market. And that means more than 100,000 people have already benefited from that scheme. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much to Ms. Bauderet of France. This was the last speaker for this morning. Distinguished delegates, it is now my great honor and privilege to welcome the President of the General Assembly at its 71st session, His Excellency Mr. Peter Thompson, and I invite him to address the Commission. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Chawath and members of the Commission, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I promise you my address is not too long. I know that everybody wants to get to lunch, and I myself have to get on a plane to San Francisco, so I'll be brief and to the point, I hope. Firstly, it's an honor to address the 55th session of the Commission on Social Development. That's a sobering thought, 55 meetings of this Commission. I congratulate you, Ambassador Chawath, on your election as the chair, and I thank you for inviting me to speak today. The long-standing work of this Commission to promote people-centered and inclusive approaches to development, including through the Copenhagen Declaration on Social Development, has helped to shape and promote key sustainable development concepts and to lay the groundwork for adoption of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. As governments and partners look to turn the Sustainable Development Goals into action, this Commission has a critical role to play in supporting implementation and ensuring that this universal master plan for people, planet and prosperity is implemented over the next 14 years. Indeed, the decision last year by this Commission to align its thematic review themes with those of the high-level political forum was an important step in defining the role of the Commission and in bringing much-needed coherence and coordination to UN efforts to support SDG implementation. The theme of this year's session, Strategies for Eradicating Poverty to Achieve Sustainable Development for All, could therefore not be more timely or more important. As the 2030 Agenda states, eradicating poverty in all its forms and dimensions, including extreme poverty, is the greatest global challenge and an indispensable requirement for sustainable development. Ending extreme poverty by 2030 is also within our reach. I firmly believe that. The more I look at poverty, the more I see it as a moral outrage that at this stage of human development it still exists on this planet. Since 1990, we've seen the number of people living in poverty reduce from 1.9 billion to 702 million in 2015. With strategic and coordinated action, we can build on the extraordinary progress made under the Millennium Development Goals and put an end to the scourge of poverty. In line with the theme of this year's session, I would therefore like to highlight 3 key cross-cutting strategies to drive implementation action on the scale necessary to eradicate extreme poverty and to achieve all of the SDGs by 2030. Firstly, we need to pursue inclusive and sustained economic growth through investments in our people. Education is central to these efforts. As an enabler of sustainable development, education empowers people with the knowledge, skills and employment opportunities needed to turn the wheels of economic growth. We must therefore invest heavily in education and ensure all people, including women and girls, minorities and young people, receive equitable and quality education as a poverty eradication priority. Secondly, we must sustain peace. People in conflict-affected countries are amongst our most vulnerable and at greatest risk of being left behind by the global development gains. Having now recognized that without sustaining peace, sustainable development is not possible, and I say having now recognized because I think the United Nations has now accepted after our meeting last month that these two things are inseparable, sustaining peace and sustainable development. Having now recognized that, we must now prioritize investments in conflict prevention efforts and in protecting human rights, in addressing root causes and building societal and institutional resilience. These are key to creating an enabling environment for sustainable development. And finally, a third point, we need to secure the sustainable financing for SDG implementation. With current estimates showing that achieving the SDGs will require annual investments of between $5 and $7 trillion, it's obviously essential that all sources of public and private funds get tapped into. Policy and regulatory reform should therefore be introduced to establish sustainable financial systems that encourage socially inclusive and environmentally sustainable practices. Implementing such reforms will help position nations to tap into the economic opportunities estimated to be worth at least $12 trillion over the next 14 years through sustainable business models. In pursuing these approaches, establishing strategic partnerships will be vital to bringing together key stakeholders and ensuring that their SDG implementation efforts are efficient, effective and coherent. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, with global attention focused on how governments, the international community, civil society and the private sector can work together to secure a sustainable future for humanity, the Commission for Social Development will continue to have a critical role to play, particularly by providing a forum for strategic analysis, the sharing of ideas, and bringing coherence to SDG implementation efforts. I congratulate the Commission on all that it has achieved, and I wish you all every success for your deliberations during this session. Thank you very much.
I thank the President of the General Assembly for his statement and in particular for making time to be with us here in spite of your very busy schedule. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Distinguished delegates, this concludes our deliberations for this morning. In accordance with our organization of work, the general discussion of sub-item 3A will continue tomorrow, 2nd of February at 3 p.m. The first three speakers on my list for tomorrow afternoon are Peru, Nigeria and Botswana. This afternoon, as you know, at 3 p.m. sharp, the Commission will hold a high-level panel discussion on the priority theme strategies for eradicating poverty to achieve sustainable development for all. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you all for your excellent cooperation in making our meeting work well and within the established timeframes, and hope to see you all again this afternoon. The meeting is adjourned.